I solve crimes that break other men. This is how it really works. At 10 years old, I watched a man get cuffed outside my window and knew the world was split in two. Dad came home in uniform every night and locked his gun away. I memorized every single movement. Every other kid played outside after school. I stayed in and studied how investigators read a scene. My law teacher couldn't tell me where justice started and rules ended. That silence shaped everything. I walked into that exam with 300 strangers and knew before it started that I would be first. They called it day one and demanded obedience. I gave them something harder to train: pure discipline. I heard the bell clearly. I chose to ignore it. The field doesn't ring bells before it tries to kill you. Real surveillance means dissolving into the background, reading every sound, becoming invisible on purpose. Everyone applauded when they called my name. I was already calculating what the next morning required. I asked her a cold question in a hospital corridor. She didn't flinch once. That was everything I needed. She put on the ring, and I swore I'd return home nightly. I broke that promise faster than I expected. First file: 1 dealer, 3 previous arrests. My partner called it routine. Nothing is ever truly routine. I sat in that vehicle for 7 consecutive nights with cold coffee and learned everything about patience. I gathered every piece of evidence and handed the whole operation over. My name appeared on nothing. The press photographed the arrest for 20 minutes. I was already back at my desk by then. He slid the folder across his desk and told me I was the only option. I didn't hesitate for a second. 40 individuals across 12 cities connected by one invisible thread. I found it and pulled hard. That informant walked into danger every single day for me. A handshake in a garage wasn't nearly enough. Her plate was empty before I arrived again. We sat together in silence and neither of us said a word. 4 pounds of human being placed in my arms, and suddenly nothing I had ever done before mattered. The phone buzzed 4 separate times on the table. I watched it and chose my daughter over the case. One photograph placed face up on the table between us. 4 minutes of silence did what force never could. One clerical error. 3 months of work dissolved overnight. The system destroyed its own conviction. I followed him without authorization on a cold night because the law moves too slowly for men like him. I entered without permission and took what I found. Technically a crime, practically the only real option. My chief screamed across his desk for 6 straight minutes. The case stood. His argument did not. An envelope under my door contained photographs of my wife and child taken without their knowledge. I packed her bags while she asked why. I gave her temporary as the answer. We both knew I was lying. She held her hand out the rear window until the car disappeared completely. I stayed there much longer. I moved a cot into the office and stopped pretending the apartment was still something I called home. A voice on an unknown line told me my family would disappear if I continued. I transcribed every word. I drove to the house and sat outside watching the lights. They were safe. I didn't knock. I drove back. A single folded address passed under a cafe table represented 12 months of dangerous, invisible work. 11 minutes to place 9 individuals in custody. Every corner of that building lived in my memory. The file was stamped closed. One uncircled name in my private notebook told me the work wasn't finished. A colleague read me the address over the phone. I recognized every word. It was my street, my building. 4 officers tried to slow me down at the tape. They read my expression and stepped aside immediately. 2 decades of emotional discipline meant absolutely nothing when I stepped through that apartment door. 4 victims total, identical method each time. 8 months of investigation and not a single solid lead. I converted the grief into fuel, and the fuel into hours at my desk. There was no other available option. He told me I was too personally involved to continue. He was correct. I left the badge and kept everything. Without credentials, I found other channels. There are always other channels when you know where to look. 3 men left me bleeding in an alley as a warning. I stood up and understood it as a confirmation. One prepaid number appeared at 4 separate crime scenes on 4 separate dates. That was my entire lead. 200 kilometers on an empty highway with no backup and no authority, just the address and the car. Every neighbor used the same 3 words: quiet, polite, kept to himself. I had heard them all before. His apartment wall showed weeks of surveillance photographs. My family appeared among the other targets. The journal described every killing with the detachment of a man recording daily weather observations. He visited the same market stall every Tuesday morning without variation. Habit is always the final mistake. Our eyes connected across the crowded market for exactly 1 second. Then we both started moving fast. 6 city blocks at full speed with failing legs and burning lungs. My mind had already finished the chase. He ran into a dead end and turned to face me without showing a single trace of fear in his expression. He went still on the ground, and I stood over him, thinking carefully about every single thing he had done. The only sound in that forest was my own breathing and the rhythm of the shovel entering the earth. The city below looked peaceful in the early light. I dialed her number anyway. She picked up immediately.